Sports, including football, have been under scrutiny lately because of the possible link between head injuries and eventual brain disease. High school sports have been a particular concern, and in Maine, the legislature went so far as to pass a law mandating measures that schools have to take to protect student athletes from head injuries. This is Phil Blampede of Today River Valley. Here's a recent story from Today River Valley that described the situation. Included in the story was a report about how the Maine Principals Association was considering allowing 8-man football at some smaller schools because that was thought possibly to reduce the risk of head injuries by reducing the amount of time some athletes spent on the field. There's an update on that. Since this story aired, the Maine Principals Association has in fact voted to allow 8-man football at smaller schools. First, we'll have a message from a local business.
The new pizza menu at the Jolly Drayman in the Briarly Inn is incomparable, with flavors and selections you won't find anywhere else. And the menu keeps changing and growing. Come by once and come by again, and again, and again. You'll never be disappointed. The Jolly Drayman Pub and the Briarly Inn, Route 2, Bethel, Maine. When over a decade ago it began to be recognized that professional football players were developing long-term brain injury from years of receiving concussions while playing, concern quickly shifted to whether something similar might be happening to children and teenagers playing football. There were some who advocated ending football entirely in high school and younger grades. But school football remains alive and well in Maine and elsewhere in the country, thanks in part to changes in the way the game is played, taught, and regulated. And those involved with the game are comfortable that the approach is the right one.
So we have some real health problems in the state of Maine that are emergencies, and specifically childhood obesity. Childhood obesity in the state of Maine should be one of our priorities. Limiting access to physical activities such as football is wrong. Should 6-year-olds be doing head-on-head tackling? No, that doesn't make sense. I think football needs to be structured in a way that it's safe and developmentally appropriate. And then, yes, I think it can be played very well. There's a lot of data that's going on about teaching proper tackling technique in football. I think that's stuff that needs to happen, but no, outlawing football I don't believe should happen.
I think the one thing that I would say is that at this point in time, nobody questions the importance of concussion awareness and that what can happen with a traumatic brain injury.
The heightened awareness of the connection between head injuries in sports and eventual brain disease developed when professional football players like the Pittsburgh Steelers' Mike Webster were shown to have suffered and sometimes died from a degenerative brain disease known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. In Maine, the concern led in 2012 to a state statute requiring schools to have a concussion policy, to train coaches on how to deal with and prevent concussions, and to remove students from games if they appear to have suffered a concussion. Dr. Paul Berkner heads the Maine Concussion Management Initiative based at Colby College in Waterville and has played a central role in helping implement concussion policies in school sports, but says the risk for school athletes is much less than that for professionals.
So there is no data that supports the fact that a concussion is related to a neurodegenerative disorder. There's a whole bunch of information out there around what's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy in a small group of retired football players, and that's the only connection at this point in time. So there is no link between sustaining a concussion and suffering long-term neurological trauma.
While the long-term effects of concussions aren't understood yet, the Coach's Handbook of the Maine Principals Association states that recent research shows that young athletes are particularly vulnerable to the effects of concussion. It defines concussions as a type of brain injury that interferes with normal brain function and can take 2 weeks or longer to clear up. According to the handbook, quote, "There is no such thing as a minor brain injury."
I have seen students who had difficult injuries that resulted in concussions that limited their ability to get through an academic curriculum. But certainly I've seen students in my time who have taken months, if not years, to recover fully from concussion.
Hannah Willahan is a project administrator for the Maine Concussion Management Initiative.
Most people will report a headache, but a headache in and of itself doesn't mean that you have a concussion. The difficult piece about recognizing concussion is that most of the symptoms are also symptoms of life. So it's the combination of several symptoms that could indicate concussion that we're looking for. Sleepiness, not feeling like yourself, just feeling off. Difficulty with focus or concentration, dizziness, blurriness, double vision, nausea and vomiting. Dr. Berkner will often say, you see one concussion and you've seen one concussion. No two are alike.
I think that for most individuals who have good access to care, it's one more thing that they have to manage. I think the vast majority of individuals who suffer concussion, who receive appropriate medical and educational accommodations, care and accommodations, do really well with their concussions. I think there's a small percentage who don't, but we can identify those. However, the problem is for those individuals who don't have good access to care. This does more than a sprained ankle or a broken leg. It really can affect their educational outcomes. So for those individuals who have poor access to care, my worry is that they're the ones who are at the greatest risk for long-term outcomes. The number of concussions that occur is probably around 5 to 10% per year if you look at all sports. One of the things, however, we're changing is to change the conversation away from just football and to the fact that concussions are an injury that occur across multiple platforms, not just sports or athletics, but also in recreation.
According to the Maine Principals Association, the concussion rate per 100,000 athlete exposures is highest for football at 77, followed by 63 for boys ice hockey, 47 for boys lacrosse, 33 for girls soccer, 31 for girls lacrosse, 27 for field hockey, and 24 for wrestling. Other sports are lower, but even cheerleading causes a few concussions.
Again, there's a lot of talk about concussions in the sport of football, but this goes across every activity. That there isn't one activity that we have where we're not dealing with, the head injuries.
But football remains a focus for the issue, probably because it came to the public's attention due to the experience of professional football players, and because most statistics show it does have the highest incidence of concussions. In the next segment, we'll look at what Maine coaches and administrators are doing to make high school football a safer game. Everybody can cross-country ski. You don't need to be a great athlete, and in western Maine, everybody knows the place to cross-country is Carter's Cross-Country Ski Center in Bethel, Maine. Don't have equipment? No problem. Carter's offers one of the best selections of quality cross-country ski equipment for sale or rent. Forested trails by the banks of the Androscoggin River offer a tranquil, natural feeling with steeper trails across the road for more experienced skiers. Make a weekend of it in the rustic off-the-grid cabins for rent. The ski shop is open 10 to 5 every day during the winter with everything you need to get out skiing, plus clothing and apparel and cross-country ski repair and tuning services. And if you prefer bicycles, ask about renting a fat tire bike to wheel over the trails, conditions permitting. Carter's, this winter, let's get you out on the trail. As indicated in the previous segment, public concern in Maine about the risk of concussions to school-age athletes was so great that in 2012, the legislature actually passed a law outlining how schools should handle the problem. The impetus was the wide reporting of the cases of professional football players who wound up with a brain disease, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, from years of head injuries during their careers. No studies have yet shown that school sports may also create long-term problems, but students experiencing concussions do experience unpleasant symptoms and have trouble with schoolwork that can last weeks or months. Since the problem was revealed through football, and there are more concussions in school football than other sports, a special focus has been put on making the sport safer for school-aged athletes.
We require all of our coaches, and that's from sub-varsity up through volunteer and stipended coaches, to watch the concussion video.
Mike Burnham is an assistant executive director of the Maine Principals Association, a nonprofit organization that organizes and oversees the high school sports leagues in Maine.
We also suggest that within each school department, they have their own protocol, that they have a concussion management team, that they develop a policy that not only returns the athletes back to the playing field, but also back into the classroom, because just as important as playing the games is being back in the classroom and getting the full academic needs met.
All the coaches need to take a concussion training protocol through a football agency over the summer. It's an online course. Equipment's been updated. They've given us everything we need to know as far as identifying concussions. We can't diagnose them because we're not doctors, but we're definitely on the lookout. Pat Mooney, I'm the head coach of Mountain Valley Football here in Rumford. It's a funny thing. They do happen. I'm not sure if they happen with the prevalence that the media kind of portrays sometimes. There's really nothing you can do because of the nature of the game and the speed of play. You do get collateral damage. The 2 concussions that I remember from the past 4 years were because of whiplash, somebody's head hitting somebody else or heads hitting the ground. All you can really do is teach the proper technique and hope that everyone else on the field does it and that everyone's head is out of the play. We teach them, do not use your head. You know, if you're going in to make a tackle on somebody, your head needs to be out of the play. You use your chest, you use your body, and you wrap and drive with your legs. The head should not be used as a weapon at any point.
So obviously you don't want your athletes to go on a tackle and lead with their head. If the running back is running, say, to the right, then we have them slide their head to the outside of the running back and wrap with their arms. Mainly attack like with their shoulders, not their helmet.
Is that harder to do than just diving head first?
No, it's just a technique that you have to teach the kids. And then we've been teaching the younger kids also, so it's kind of like all the way up through. Because we have youth football from 2nd grade all the way through to 8th grade. I'm Tim O'Connor, the head football coach of Telstar Regional High School. I'd say we probably get like 1 or 2 a year. We haven't had any this year so far. Last year we had 1, and then we had another one that was a possible 1.
There are other things. As far as blocking goes, the old school method was use your flipper and get your body into the play. We kind of teach more of blocking with hands, getting up inside the shoulder pads. Again, everything we teach, you get the head out of the play. And we make that very clear to them.
There is a question as to whether equipment could be designed to reduce concussions, but the likelihood isn't great.
Companies tend to package their product as concussion-proof. There is no concussion-proof helmets, but we are getting the best that we can as far as reputation goes for safety.
No one's been able to show that helmets prevent concussions. They're basically designed as a motorcycle helmet for those high velocity, high impact that cause skull fractures. They're not designed to reduce the number of concussions, and that's been clearly shown that they don't reduce the number of concussions.
Many schools have adopted impact testing, which can measure how severe a concussion a student may have.
You know, the impact testing, which we've been doing for years, is a way to evaluate the cognitive effects of concussions. And if you have cognitive effects, we can work with the schools to accommodate your classrooms and your test schedules and those sorts of things so that you're getting the assistance you need within school as well.
On September 15, 2018, Telstar High School played Booth Bay at the Telstar campus in Bethel, Maine, a notable match since both teams have struggled to have a sufficient number of students on the roster to have a full season. Smaller squads like these are seen possibly as increasing the risk of concussions, as players have to stay on the field longer and smaller students get in the game more often. With school enrollment declining throughout Maine, the Maine Principals Association is considering introducing 8-man instead of 11-man football for some of the smaller schools.
Well, I think just by the numbers that if you're playing with a smaller roster size and the kids are participating in more of the games for a greater part of the game, then the risk of injury certainly increases. And then along with that, you may be playing some students, if you don't have many kids on your roster, that physically may not match up against another school and the size of their athletes. So sometimes you see, a disparity just in the size and ability of kids from different schools. We changed our policy on cooperative teams where 2 or 3 schools can come together if their numbers are insufficient to have a full roster and join together and make one team. And in a number of our sports, certainly in ice hockey, the majority of our teams are cooperative teams where the schools have joined together. We're seeing more and more football schools doing that, as well as some other schools. I think the other thing our football committee is looking at is the possibility of introducing 8-man football, where with a smaller roster size, you don't need to have 11 people on the field, and that we're in hopes to get the support of that. And some of those schools with smaller rosters might be better off playing 8-man football. Football is embedded in a number of communities that there really is nothing like a Friday night football game to bring a community together, or a Saturday afternoon if you don't have lights. It is certainly one of those activities that builds community pride.